All right, just got out of Maxine. This is my first reaction, literally just walked out of that theater.
Maxine. Your agent tells us you're quite a popular name in adult film and entertainment. Is that correct?
I'm still kind of scratching my head when it comes to that third act. Some decisions in there, some things that happen where, you know, the audience was giggling a little bit. It gets a little overly silly. There's some character decisions that are just so over the top. That being said, aesthetically, stylistically, the atmosphere, the editing, the cinematography, this is such a cinematic horror movie. My God, it looks beautiful, and I was really hooked on the mystery. I was engaged in Maxine's story really through the first two acts, and I have a lot to think about with the third act, but I mean, I was in. I'm like, yes, I'm loving what they're doing. This is crazy, this is hectic, but they're building this mystery that's so intriguing. Now, when they resolve that mystery, I'm still not sure if I fully love the resolve, but I'm at least intrigued. And I feel like if I think about it and try to put the puzzle pieces together, it'll make more sense to me. So, yeah, the movie's got me thinking. And that's good. Most horror films, especially in this vein, don't do that. This one definitely did that. And again, it feels so freaking cinematic. So, as a fan of this trilogy now as a whole, this one does work and will work for a lot of those fans. But it may leave some scratching their head. And it'll leave me a lot to talk about on our Movie Mode podcast when I dive into spoilers. But really, for the rest of this review, thank God I have about an hour until I shoot that.
3 hours later.
Scratch that. More like 12 hours. I won't lie to you. I had to sleep on this. I'm glad I saw an early screening because there's so much to think about. Now, I want to start with Mia Goth. Again, giving a phenomenal horror lead performance. I still think Pearl is her strongest, but she is so good in Maxine. She is dynamic, and she's just fascinating. She's so confident in this movie. When something's got to be done, she either gets it done immediately or waits until the time is right. And that's one thing I love about this character is, one, you never know what she's going to do next, but two, you don't know exactly how she's going to reach her goal, even though in the back of your head, you know she's going to get there eventually. And part of that is Mia Goth, part of that is the writing surrounding her character, but overall, just awesome. Now, if you're wondering, do I have to watch X and Pearl? Can I just watch X? Can I just watch Pearl, the movie? Not Mr. Crab's daughter.
Pearl's my daughter, I'll spit in your eye.
I'll be honest, I don't think you have to watch Pearl to watch this film. I would definitely watch X because a lot of the things that happen in this movie spawn from that one, but Pearl is the least important to this film. That being said, Pearl is still my favorite in the trilogy, so you should watch it.
That's why he's the GOAT! The GOAT!
Michelle Monaghan, Bobby Cannavale, and Kevin freaking Bacon, who is, I don't want to say unrecognizable because I'm still like, oh, that's Kevin Bacon, but it's Kevin Bacon being an insane, gross, nasty lunatic of sorts, even though he's just a private detective. But the role he plays in the story was interesting. A lot of that because of Kevin Bacon's performance, just the way he carried himself, and the fact that he's having a lot of fun here. And you could tell every actor is having a good time. Even Elizabeth Debicki, who is the most straightforward and no-nonsense character of the bunch. She's kind of the guiding light for Maxine, or her way into where she wants to go. That's Hollywood. That's to be a star. That's the ultimate goal. Even she's probably having a good time playing her character. Bobby Cannavale is, I'd say, having the best time, even though there were things about his character that were a little overboard and cartoonish in the third act, and we'll get into those third act issues here in just a second. But the cast is really good, and the story, the mystery, was engaging through the first two acts. I was so intrigued to see who actually is following Maxine, who is responsible for all of these murders. Are they connected? And it plays like a mystery crime thriller of sorts, as opposed to a pure horror film. This one is actually the least horror of the entire franchise, and up until the third act, I'm like, is there going to be any horror here? I mean, there are murders, there are deaths, there are kills, some freaky moments, but it doesn't feel like pure horror, and that's okay.
Liar!
I'm not the biggest horror guy in the world, but that's kind of what made the other two movies special when they became that. Okay, let's talk about the reason why this movie is going to work for a lot of people, and that is capturing the time period perfectly. This is kind of Ty West's love letter to Hollywood. That's very obvious, the way he shoots Hollywood, and just the fact that our characters walking around to these various locations. My friend Ryan made a reference on our podcast. It's kind of like Grand Theft Auto. You're just going from store to store on these little side missions, and that's great, man. The exploration of Hollywood, the way these scenes and sequences are edited together, first of all, but then the cinematography, which is just gorgeous. I got Hoyt Van Hoytema vibes. Elliot Rocket, our director of photography, did this entire trilogy, and all of them look distinctly different. This one is the most vivid and vibrant at times, and it really does just feel like you're walking around in 1985. Not just the locations, but the look and feel, the color grading, the shot selection, the camera placement is beautiful, man. This is one of the best movies to look at in 2024. I'm not kidding. Stylistically, it's a top 5 film. And comparing it to other horror movies I've seen this year, it's not even close. I mean, I love Late Night with the Devil, but this is a better looking movie on every front. A lot of times I'll walk out of a horror movie and be like, you don't really remember the visuals or the cinematography or the style or the aesthetic or the atmosphere, which is bad.
This is bad. This is very, very bad.
When it's a horror movie, but this has all of that, atmosphere included, and Ty West just created a visual spectacle. It's one you have to see on the big screen because it feels so freaking cinematic. You start comparing this to other blockbusters, the fact that it looks so much better, it's kind of insane. Oh, and the score, too. A little bit of John Carpenter in there with that synth flavor. Very retro. The vibes, is that what the kids say? The vibes were good. But here's my issue, folks, what I needed to marinate on. The ending, the third act. And I mentioned confusion in my reaction. That's not really confusion based around me trying to figure out what's going on. It was obvious what was going on. And they reference it in the beginning. They tie it together at the end. Okay, I appreciate that. And there are things that do make a lot of sense. My confusion mostly spawned from the decision as to why they chose to go so outlandish with the third act and make some of these villainous characters and really some of the supporting characters that weren't this way in the first 2 acts cartoons. And when I say cartoons, I mean overboard, over the top, cartoonish, a little ridiculous, and there were moments where I'm saying, this just feels like a completely different movie. It feels more like Pearl, and it's crazy because I love Pearl, but less like the first 2 acts of this movie. And because it's so distinctly different tonally and just the way that you feel while watching, it was jarring. Very jarring. And in the moment, I compared some of the over-the-top performances to like an SNL skit. And that's not what you want to be doing with the first 2 acts being what they were. And we do an ending discussion on the Movie Mode podcast. I'll post one on the Burke Reacts YouTube channel, but I just feel as if this didn't necessarily fit with what they were going for at the beginning. And when the mystery that was so compelling begins to unravel, and it unravels very quickly, I kind of like that reveal. I just don't know if I like the way it was handled. And even after sitting on it for 12 hours, I'm still thinking of it, which is good, which is what you want with the horror movie, but it keeps this from being a top 3 to 5 movie of the year. It's still a great experience overall, super entertaining, and the more I think about it, the more I'm like, okay, well, this does fit with the rest of the trilogy very well. First of all, you're flipping some cult tropes on their heads when it comes to Hollywood, and then the religious aspect of this film. There's some crazy religious nuts fighting the people that are in Hollywood all throughout this movie, and that comes heavily into play in the third act, and they flip that script for a horror movie. I think that's really creative. And Maxine's journey, I was still really engrossed all the way through the third act. It's just the way certain characters are handled and some of the dialogue doesn't quite match up to what I was getting prior. And I have accepted that it does work for the franchise and what the franchise is. I just still don't like how tonally jarring it was, and it really prevented this from being possibly the best in the entire trilogy. But saying all of that, the movie's still really entertaining, and I'm okay with it being a little over the top because you know what? Some of my favorite horror movies are ridiculous and over the top in the third act. Just this year, Late Night with the Devil, one of my favorites, felt kind of the same way, and so I'm willing to give that a pass. I understand. I've seen on Twitter people think it's absolutely ridiculous and crazy, but I think what Ty West is trying to say thematically, he's intending on it being that way. And so it's a very distinct choice that I wasn't fully in on, but I at least appreciate it and respect it. And hey, I'm thinking about it and talking about it. And how often does that happen with a horror movie in 2024? It hasn't happened very often. So that's my question. What'd you think about the third act? Was it too much? It absolutely was. But did it work for you? Did it flow for you? What's your favorite movie in the trilogy? And what's your favorite A24 horror film? We may do a countdown. And we're talking heavy spoilers on Movie Mode this weekend. Of course, drop a like on this vid if you enjoyed it. MaXXXine is one of the best looking movies in years. Aesthetically and stylistically, this is an insanely beautiful theatrical experience as it captures the perfect atmosphere. It's less scary and more intriguing as the mystery is engrossing through the first two acts. The third act is a lot. It feels a bit too over the top for its own good. Regardless, this trilogy capper must be experienced on the big screen, especially if you're a fan of the franchise. I acknowledge this movie's flaws, they are evident, but I had such a good time and I was so engrossed in the world that was created and the atmosphere that I'm going to recommend MaXXXine. It's one you should see, especially if you're a fan of this franchise, but also just to see what you think about the ending. Does it work for you? I'm so curious to see what this cinema score is going to be. Probably not good. All right, I'll see you in tomorrow's review for Kill.